Oki, Naganago Mekoche Chestokomaki, or Dekots Nagotine Siku. My name is Red Thunder Woman. My married English name is Michelle Robinson, and I use she and her pronouns. Today is December 12th, 2022. Today I'm solo. I thought it was really important today that we talked about a lot of things. So let's get going. My Dene lineage roots me in the land of the Great Bear Lake tribe in Treaty 11. My name is Dekots Nagotine Siku. My people wore rabbit skin, so it's been referred to as the land of the hare people. I'm a native to Turtle Island, and my Dene Nation is a visitor to this area of Clincho Tine Indahe in Satu Dene, meaning many big dog town, named after the Calgary Stampede. I was born in Calgary, or in Blackfoot, Mohkinstsis, as Michelle Elliott, another English name, which has afforded me privilege in an English colonial world. But we're going to talk about that today. My mother is Northern Slavey Dene, or Satu Dene, but my Indian Act Imposed status card by the Canadian government says Yellowknives Dene. I should mention my daughter's 15, still does not have her status because the Indian Act Imposed status card by the Canadian government disproportionately discriminates against women and girls and Two-Spirit. Anyway, through my father, I am a daughter of the Mayflower and a daughter of the American Revolution while having a Canadian Indian Act Imposed status card. That is a colonial construct by Canadian policies meant to divide Indigenous people's inherent rights, Indigenous Two-Spirit, or the Indigenous 2S LGBTQ plus community. And Indigenous women are at the bottom of the Canadian socioeconomic ladder because of colonial trauma, imposed poverty, racism, gendered violence, and land theft. I do not speak on behalf of all Indigenous, but I share my journey as I walk down the red road. I just want to mention, I know I'm live on TikTok. Hello, TikTok. I'm really sorry I couldn't figure out how to make that work really nice yet. So I'm doing a live recording on both Facebook and TikTok. I don't have any clue what the comments are, nor do I care. I hope I can get to them maybe next episode. And hopefully next time I'll figure out a better way to have you all figured out so that you get a nicer stream. But if you want, you can look on my YouTube channel and whatever podcast streaming service that you get, and you'll be able to listen from there. So as a Dene woman who has attempted to run after joining harmful colonial parties, spent money to be at expensive conventions, left my home to travel to those conventions just to vote on incomplete policies that still allow incarceration, a denial of justice, a denial of health services, racism, colonial trauma, and genocide of Indigenous and Black peoples, I have work to continue to do, reports to advocate for, and attempt to work within these systems meant to harm me and my community. I think of all of this today, and I hope we honor the many Indigenous lives lost for this so-called country named Canada. I hope that you all see your role in the importance of stopping harm, and as a citizen, see your role in reconciliation and as a treaty partner. Pride Month should never just be 1 month, as it is important to understand that the straight agenda and gendered violence was and continues to be forced on this land by Christian outsiders. Land acknowledgements are critical for creating a safer space for Indigenous people, as well as honoring the host as the guest and acknowledging your role as a treaty partner in a so-called time of reconciliation. It's important land acknowledgements have meaning. I encourage all folks to introduce themselves with an acknowledgement of their ancestors, story of displacement, how you perceive your role as a treaty partner, a citizen of Canada, a refugee, or whatever land displacement, so we as Indigenous people know how safe you are to be around. If you don't know how to pronounce your local Indigenous nations' names, won't say your pronouns, won't say your story of origin, won't acknowledge stolen lands, won't acknowledge imposed economic oppression or your role in reconciliation, I determine how safe you are to be around my community, my family, and myself. Understanding land acknowledgements and their importance is Indigenous 101 because it immediately addresses colonialism, oppression dynamics, broken treaties, and lies taught today in Canadian and American schools nationally, and I would argue all of the Western world for that matter. That's why as settlers and those who call themselves native Calgarians or whatever frickin' town you're from, you show me you have no Indigenous 101 understanding. Jesse Winte's book Unreconciled really explains that perfectly, as do many other Indigenous authored books. Land Back is a movement that could save the planet from climate change created by colonialism, but it would be a part of that treaty relationship, part of meaningful reconciliation, and honoring global initiatives like the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I honor the Blackfoot, as the elders and members have been so kind to me on my Red Road journey. Elder Red Crane taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Blackfoot, and Leonard Kenny taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Satu Dene. My humblest apologies to the Blackfoot and Dene elders and language keepers as I try to learn proper pronunciation. I'm speaking to you on the lands of the Niitsitapi, which is the Blackfoot Confederacy. The Blackfoot south of the imposed US-Canadian border are the Blackfeet. North of the border are the Siksika, Gunai, and Piikani of the Confederacy. These lands are Treaty 7, signed September 22nd, 1877, with signatures that include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Wesley, Chiniki, and Bearspaw Nation of the Stoney Nation, and the Dene from Tsuut'ina. I acknowledge all First Nation, Métis, Inuit, status and non-status across Turtle Island as the keepers of these lands. All non-Indigenous are treaty partners with the government signing on your behalf. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you to my previous donors for showing your support. If you value listening or watching and can afford to give, thank you. To those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or questions. Also, giving a review helps no matter what medium you're listening from. I have started to do that, and I'll talk about that today. I have a YouTube channel that you can go and subscribe as well. Go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media. And if you want to have a further discussion with me. So last week we had a wonderful guest, Elijah Neal, and they gave me feedback already that some of you have reached out. So thank you to those who reached out to them. I'm really hoping we can create a good, positive community. We had a sacred fire on the full moon, and it was absolutely wonderful. We had a great turnout for local Indigenous community as well. My hope is that folks feel empowered after being at ceremony to, as Indigenous people, you have the inherent right to your ceremony. All you non-Indigenous are a bunch of appropriating pricks, so please don't do that. That would be great if you didn't, actually. So I wanted to talk a lot today about a few different things. So I want to talk about the Harry and Meghan Netflix special and why that matters, the Sovereignty Act. I want to talk about the TV show Wednesday. I want to talk about TikTok, and I had an incident happen to me. Anti-Indigenous incident. And I want to talk a bit about book club. So for folks who don't know, we have a book club once a month on the second Monday of the month. Our next one is Standoff, Why Reconciliation Fails Indigenous People and How to Fix It by Bruce McIver. So if you want to be a part of that, please don't hesitate. If you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see some of the previous book clubs, so you have an idea how they work. In my book club, Indigenous people speak first because non-Indigenous have always had the platform and messed it up. Thanks a lot. Climate change, colonialism, it's so great. So let's talk a bit about that. And for the next book club after Mondays will be the National Inquiry. We're going to do chapters 9 and 10 and go from there. Tomorrow is also, or tonight, actually, tonight's Sunday, the Reconciliation Action Group. So I think that meeting's at 7. If you don't know, you should be a part of a reconciliation group. And if you're not doing action, then what are you doing? You're not part of reconciliation to me, folks. So no matter where you are in the country, start working on your Indigenous understanding, maybe listening to podcasts, educate yourself, but do the work. I mean, here in Calgary, the CBE, they're going to do this. They're going to committee us to death with every little single thing. So Deaf Chiefs, like angry mascot of a white person with like native war paint and a headdress. And guess what? They're totally fine with that. That's not racist. And I keep thinking of all the surrounding nations that are like literally Treaty 7 that can't go to that school. And all the kids who are Indigenous who have to go to that school and see this racist propaganda. And all of the non-Indigenous parents who claim to wear orange shirts and want to do reconciliation and don't call out their own damn school for racist propaganda. So you're not making the world safer for my child, let alone the next generations. So start working on this, folks. Anyway, I'm going to start talking about this Netflix show, Bruce. I don't know where that came from. Sorry to all the Bruces in my life. I know where that came from. Bruce McIver's book. So that's why I'm thinking of a Bruce. So Netflix put out Harry and Meghan's Netflix special. So I obviously have a podcast for a reason. In Canada, especially, we have so many people who don't understand propaganda. Worse, you have these like freedom fighters who know nothing about the Indian Act and actual oppression, like basically taking this narrative of, oh my God, the CBC, they're so propaganda filled. And I laugh because I'm like, that the last board of directors that were appointed was by Harper. So they're actually not liberal talking points. And there's this negative conversation about folks who, read. And these are the folks that they're attacking instead of the Indian Act, instead of, working with Indigenous community on craptastic initiatives like the Deaf Chiefs or, whatever other craptastic the city thinks they're honoring us with, which is actually an insult. Let's get back to Harry and Meghan. The reason why this is important is that they had to do this show because of the propaganda, because of the, not just the propaganda, the industry of propaganda that's especially based in the UK when it comes to, trying to sell, I don't know, Prince Harry taking a poop, like it's stupid. Like they have cameras everywhere. They're jumping out of bushes. And for folks like me who are like super old, we lived through Princess Diana being murdered. And, all of the, like for 10 years after she passed, she was on the front cover of every single magazine, newspaper, whatever, and never actually telling the truth about what happened. And, so I only read things from her family because I knew the rest of it were royal propaganda lies. And that's not just that, like a divorced propaganda lie coming from King Charles' team now and Camilla's team and the monarchy themselves as an institution. So like to me, it was really important to listen to what Harry and Meghan had to say themselves and not somebody's twist on their shit. And it's sweet, it's cute. Like they show really intimate little videos of them, falling in love. So there's 3 episodes, they're an hour each. And they had a tricolor beagle just like us, and Meghan did actually. So I was complaining to my dad and my family about it because you see, I feel like because I was raised white, I was raised on the white side of my family by my father, very much a pro-military family, very much pro monarchy. So long before they had human rights in cadets, I took gunnery instructor, and like we had to sing "God Save the Queen" inside like a steaming hot tunnel with people with bats, banging it. We had to scream it louder so that they could hear us over top of them banging on us. Like this is the type of like what they did to you as in my teens when you were taking these courses. And ironically, I thought it was a ton of fun at the time. I have nothing but good things to say about it. And I'm sure today's Sea Cadets and cadets program is a lot better. I never experienced sexual harassment or anything like that. So to me, it was fun. I was homesick a lot. This was long before all you kids, you're so lucky. You have like long distance packages and programs. So like you could call people and it not be $1 million. And it got to the point where I wasn't even allowed to call home anymore. And they wouldn't accept the charges because I was calling home so much. So, I really loved Sea Cadets, but I was shipped off on the West Coast. Anyway, so this is where I learned protocol. I learned protocol about God Save the Queen, Oh Canada, different military rankings, listening to a drill instruction, things like that. So that's why I think today when I help the Calgary Police with their new recruits, I understand the protocol. And these things matter. The average Canadian doesn't know them. And I know them because I come from this pro-military background. And then on my native side, very conservative Catholic people, very conservative. Be Catholic, be conservative, be Canadians. And, I'm the first generation to wear a ribbon skirt, be proudly Indigenous, right? I'm that first generation. And obviously I'm trying to teach my daughter to be proud moving forward as well. So, this is kind of my background. And so when I watched this Meghan and Harry show, and, Meghan especially, like, I'm sure she's a lovely person. You can see throughout this entire thing, she is a lovely person, but it just infuriates me how little Americans know about, and Canadians now, how little they know about the monarchy. I feel very like one of the 0.0001% of Canadians that understand protocol of the monarchy. And then, add to now we've changed from queen to king. Like I've stood for God Save the King in the Mawada armories now. So like these things matter if you are Canadian. And I mean, I have a friend who didn't even know that the RCMP, what it meant, what it stood for. Because we actually aren't taught this in our Canadian school system, sadly. And so when people, are drinking the Kool-Aid of Daniel Smith's Sovereignty Act, they have no concept of what Canada was actually built on. They have no concept of treaty, nothing. Because not only were they not taught their own stupid monarchy history, but they also don't know their Indigenous obligations to treaty. All Canadians, not just Indigenous people, all Canadians. And then you have Indigenous people who have served in the military, who are descendants of treaty signatures, and they know the treaty inside and out, but they also know that our obligation is to the Crown of England. So this concept of, that being transferred from the Crown of England to Canada and then to provinces that we never signed treaty with, like that gets lost in translation of all of this anyway, because most people don't know the basics of anything, let alone, whether it's their colonial history, their Indigenous history, how those intermingle together. So to me, it is very frustrating watching this because, she's learning for the first time what a big deal it is to see the Queen and to curtsy and to know the protocol around the Queen. And like, to give you an idea, I remember when the American cadets they came up to Canada in our Sea Cadet camp, and we were kind of seeing the differences between American and Canadian. And at that time, they were so strict against us as women. They wouldn't let us wear makeup no matter what. We weren't allowed to wear earrings no matter what. And then these American cadets come up, and they, like all of the women, have all of the makeup done, and they have their hair done, and they have their caps on. And we're looking over, not even allowed to wear freaking earrings, let alone lipstick, So it was really eye-opening getting to meet them. And when they salute like this. And in Canada, well, in the Commonwealth, actually, like I was taught in gunnery that we salute like this, because once the Queen seen the dirty hands of the soldiers, and commented on it, that was when the protocol was changed, so that you would never see the hand. So if you look really closely at any Canadian saluting, you'll notice you don't see the palm of their hand, and that's the reasoning. And there's all sorts of stupid shit when it comes to British military protocol. For example, a lot of people, they'll cheer and they'll clink their glasses, and there's an old saying that you never clink your glasses, you just raise them politely and then drink, because if you clink them, that's a dead sailor. So you don't clink your glasses. So I'm telling you this because that's all Britain is. And they made a really great point in the start of it to really show how the culture of the monarchy is an institutional part of what is happening in Britain, and that in Britain, how they see the Commonwealth, like Canada and all of the other colonized countries they have across the world, as they did them a favor. And now, as an Indigenous person, I have a lot to say about that. But as one of the greatest part of this whole thing was really starting to showcase the racism. Obviously, we all know, folks who listen to my show, who follow Indigenous voices, they're very aware of slavery and the history of slavery, not just the genocide of slavery, the ruining of countries based off of the slave trade. So, there's a different dynamic there when it comes to talking about that history. And it was mentioned in this documentary that Britain is not taught about the slave trade. They are taught about when they ended the slave trade. So all of the horrible genocide that they are guilty of and have blood on their hands for, including my ancestor from the Mayflower, all of these folks have blood on their hands intergenerationally. And of course, nobody wants to admit that, right? Whether you're American or Canadian, but also part of the bigger Commonwealth and part of Britain and a descendant of Britain. Not that I want to exclude the other countries who also had the slave trade, but I focus mainly on this because I'm Canadian, and I'm a descendant of both the Mayflower as well as being Indigenous. And what happened because of the slave trade directly impacts our lives today, because white supremacy is baked into every aspect of Calgary, Alberta, and Canada. today, every aspect of it. And a lot of Canadians are so unaware of all of it, right? Because if they don't experience racism and they don't understand what white supremacy is, they don't think twice about it. So it was really important that Megan's family talked about that. She's more of a white passing Black person, mixed race. And as a mixed race person, she said a lot of things that I really understood. And in the end, it was her white father that really was awful and hurtful to her when it came to marrying into the crown. And you feel bad for them going through that, despite them being incredibly privileged people. A little backstory about Harry. So Harry, he came to Alberta and he served at Suffield. And Suffield was a place that they do a lot of trading with Britain. And it's just east here of Calgary. And the British Army are such a bunch of fucking douchebags that they've actually been banned from a lot of places in Medicine Hat and the close by town of Suffield because of their behavior. And because they're British, they get away with a lot of awful atrocities of rape and fist fighting and such. So I actually don't think highly at all of the British Army and the way they behave when they're here in Alberta. And they're here all the time doing training exercises. And Harry was here. And in fact, I've been told, so for folks who don't know, I'm the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women co-chair here in Calgary, try to help with all events, but specifically the October 4th Sisters in Spirit one. So, I've heard ridiculous stories of rape from those folks, and they actually have something called the Wall of Shame. And it was like a poster board of all of the local girls that they knew they could rape. So, and the RCMP won't investigate, or the local police, they don't care, right? Because they're like, oh my God, we love the British and we love the military and we love the king and we love the queen. So no, what? And we love sexism and we love misogyny and we ourselves are sexual harassers, as has been said in multiple reports. So, these people don't respect women. They certainly don't respect Indigenous women, right? So anyway, just fun side note, none of that is mentioned in there. He did mention wearing the Nazi uniform and how incredibly embarrassed he was. It sounded like that was kind of the impetus for him to unpack his white privilege. But he, I would have liked to hear how he embarrassed his own family. My dad, he'll get teared up over this, talking about the royal family being bombed by the Nazis in Buckingham Palace. So I don't know if Harry ever had that conversation with Queen Mum, but it would have been interesting to hear that one. So, and yeah, I do have sympathy for Harry, though, and in the bigger picture of losing his mother. And he talks a lot about losing his mother. So for those of us old enough who went through the whole Princess Diana loss, it's re-mourning her all over again, going through that through the eyes of her son. And I thought that was really important that he talked about the industry of the media. And of course, that's why I have a podcast. I have a podcast because all there is in Canada is British colonial media. And folks who even think they're liberal are the ones who were bawling and crying and sharing their stories about when they met the king or when they met the queen or when they met whatever. And it was such a hard moment because during that time when she died, as Indigenous people, we're going through all these awful things, and all of that conversation gets taken away. So at the time she died was when that killer went on a rampage in James Bay. Just recently, the Liberal government talked about investment in mental health services, which I hope is true, and we'll see. Regardless, there's always something happening that's of incredible importance. And the last 2 weeks have been really hard for me to discuss because of the serial killer in Winnipeg that had killed at least 4 women that we know. And Canada's just okay with that. They're just like, yeah, it's freaking cool. We're not holding our, city of Calgary, city of Winnipeg. We're not holding the province of Alberta, the province of Manitoba, or the country at all responsible for not implementing 94 calls to action and 231 calls to justice, because it doesn't matter to me. And ironically, the thing that I wish all, especially QT BIPOC who are non-Indigenous, if you understood that implementing these calls to justice and calls to action helps all Canadians. And then for the white Canadians, literally learning about, you know, oppression dynamics, white privilege, straight cis privilege, ableism, all of these things would actually help all of Canada as well. We would be a better country. But you're so committed to white supremacy, British, you know, crapola, that we're not getting there. So to me, every single person who dies is blood on our hands, all of our hands, not just yours, but mine too, collectively, for not having better policy, because it's totally preventable. Every person who dies of overdose, totally preventable. But by policy, we've chosen not to do it. So anyway, back to Harry and Meghan. Really important conversation to have about your history, your understanding. Treaties, of course, not mentioned, but the only reason why Canada can exist is because of treaties. And because the average Canadian still doesn't understand Indigenous people, their obligations to treaties. They're just like, yeah, Danielle Smith's the greatest because she introduced the Sovereignty Act, and because she did, we get to be independent of Ottawa, which is the most ignorant take you could possibly have. Not just ignorant in the sense of, oh, I'm a liberal, and obviously, you know, this is the rule of law, it is fine, because centrists always end up siding on the rule of the oppressor. But it just shows the ignorance of understanding treaty, and it undermines reconciliation and focusing on moving forward as a country. And I know a lot of folks think that having independence from Ottawa is a good thing, but it goes against your own constitution. It's unconstitutional. In a court of law, this will be challenged. You are wasting taxpayers' money on all sides. Like, it's so interesting how racist will say, well, and I'll say this because I've been deleting these comments on my TikTok all week, that they accuse us of just wanting money. And it's not like that. You choose to spend a lot of money in the courts solely based off the fact you're so ignorant about Canada, the foundation of treaties, and moving forward as a country. So the Sovereignty Act, for all Albertans who think it's a good thing, who voted for Danielle Smith, you literally are costing us millions of dollars. I'm sure there are lawyers that are over the moon over your ignorance so that they can make this money. But it also undermines Indigenous people's treaties. And for folks who think it's all about money, let me tell you, we do not get dollar-to-dollar funding for your precious little white babies who get to be in the schools. We don't get dollar-to-dollar funding for infrastructure for reservations. We don't get dollar-to-dollar funding in any aspect of anything. And when we do go into the urban centers like I am, we face nothing but racism. And it's easier for me to call it anti-Indigenous racism because I get racism from brown people, Asian people, all sorts of folks all the time who are people of color. But because they are people of color, they perpetuate the worst racism to me. And companies, especially run by white people, think that they aren't capable of racism because of it. So I went to the Red Deer Radisson, and what happened? I had a brown manager that was nothing but a fucking asshole to us. He said deplorable things to us. He said, well, I don't even know what type of people you are. And all because of a stupid misunderstanding, frankly. Yeah, I've been in customer service. I grew up in Sylvan Lake, so I absolutely know how to kiss the butt of a tourist in order to get their money. And I was being raised in Sylvan Lake. So I know what customer service is. I used to make a lot of money on tips because of customer service. So I know this man was just absolutely allowing his ego to stop us from being able to stay. And ironically, although I talk about racism and anti-Indigenous bias all the time, I didn't realize it was happening to me at the moment. It was only later in retrospect when I was thinking about why because my husband was furious. I thought he might even have a freaking heart attack that day. So quick backstory. One of my brothers just had a baby. We were so happy. We were over the moon. we are having serious car issues. So 2 weeks of being in and out of the mechanic, them not finding the issue. Finally, we just booked 2 days time off because the car was working. And my husband took 2 days off of work in order for us to go to Sylvan Lake and see my new little one. And so he had points from his hotels.com. He booked the hotel. We go there to check in, and he just doesn't want to give us this space. We've done this a million times using our points, getting to a place. We went to Victoria, to Vancouver, using our points and, paying extra for our animal that we always had. And this guy was committed to not giving us a room, just committed to it. And so we were like, well, it must have been a problem at hotels.com. And so my husband spent, 20 minutes on the phone trying to figure this out. And then we went over and seen my new little one, and came back. We were assured after all this time on the phone, we would get this room. Get there. There's a wonderful gentleman named Joseph. So Joseph at Radisson Red Deer, we loved you. We wish we could have stayed with you because we were pretty sure we were about to get checked in. But the so-called manager that was on shift until 11, he did not want us staying there. And he intervened, and he said that we weren't very nice people, that we were awful. He kept saying he was some award-winning person. And I was looking around and I said, oh, I don't see this award. It was an awful, awful experience. And then when I was like, okay, well, let's get going. He's like, oh no, we'll give you the room, the top room. And I'm like, this man, I don't trust at all. He has said awful things about us as human beings. Like it was awful. So our, bodies were reacting. We were really upset. We get in the car, we start drive back to Calgary, -30. We have our daughter, we have our dog. And we started driving, and I realized it was the same day I graduated from the TikTok Graduation Accelerator Program. And I had my sweater that said TikTok Accelerator Program. I had these particular earrings in, and I don't think my hair was in braids. They were long. I just had long hair, but it dawned on me on the way home, I'm visibly Indigenous today. That's what it is. And my husband went quiet. And when he called the next day after we had calmed down, and told hotels.com and told the Radisson, they just brushed it off because he was a brown man. How could he possibly be guilty of racism when racism and anti-Indigenous bias are not the same thing? And so I don't have nice things to say about hotels.com, nor do I have nice things to say about the Radisson and Red Deer right now, or that manager. Now, Joseph, the guy who was working there, was a very nice man. I knew he was trying to work. He was on the phone with hotels.com, which was why we were assured it would be fine. But that's not the way the world works. And folks who don't know what white privilege is, this is something you would never experience. When I tell my dad, he has no concept. Like, he's like, I just can't believe this happened. I'm like, I know. This is what white privilege is. And people don't know what it is until they experience it. And for folks who listen to my couple of podcasts ago, we had Kurt Young on, and he talked about when he was experiencing racism, he just assumed his son had lice until he went to someone else and verified his son didn't. And they were just being discriminated against with their anti-Indigenous bias from brown men, from Lebanese men. This is my reality. This is the reality of what it's like to live in Calgary, Red Deer, Alberta. Like this is it. So it's really shook my world. We have these points that we need to use up by the end of the year, but lucky for hotels.com, we'll probably just let them go because after our experience, how do you trust? I don't. And I don't trust that this manager will let me in based off of his anti-Indigenous bias. So we talk about economic reconciliation. This is an example of that. This is an example of white businesses that could potentially have more Indigenous money if they would not be racist pricks and just not be jerks to us. Like, we give all this free information in the hopes that you won't be jerks to us, and yet you're still jerks to us. So that was my racist incident that had happened. But I do want to focus on some good things. The TikTok Accelerator Program, a lot of us who took it together are still talking together. And Christopher Britt, who's on TikTok, put together a compilation of us, kind of like, those like 80s intros and comedies where there's like a piece of you and you all smile at the camera. It's like that, only to the theme of beachcombers. So I shared it. I think our Anouk Beauty, she was the one who put it up on her account. I'm not smart enough to figure out how to do all these things. That's why I'm not there yet. But once I do figure it out, I will put up stuff like that. Anyway, really cute. It was great to see kind of this graduation program being put together in such a cute way. So it was great. Really enjoyed it. And I really learned a lot about myself through that program. So if you are an Indigenous person and you're feeling like it's not for you, you're wrong, absolutely sign up for it. It is a great program. They gave me, I think, I want to say 3 packages at least. I got like this cute little microphone. I got one of those TikTok rings that you put on your phone. We got time with some amazing creators. I'd tell my family, I'd be like, yeah, that spooky Celine, I talked to her, and they were like, what, you talked to her? And all of these amazing Indigenous content creators like Sherry McKay and things like that. So like, absolutely, it boosted my self-esteem. It boosted me in many ways, learning what my branding is, the content. I have nothing but good things to say about it. So if you're Indigenous and you're even thinking about it, just do it. One of the things they taught me was that, you know, be creative, do things even if you don't get that many views. Just do things you like. And I don't know if y'all watched Wednesday, the new Netflix show on TV, but oh my God, it's so cute. And I obviously, you know, 3 generations now of Addams Family. I love that show. I think Indigenous love the Addams Family a lot more because we know what it's like to be the outsider, but still live your life in a good way, in a fun way with lots of humor that is ridiculous. So I loved it. And I was really happy that my daughter and I got to watch it together. And the dance that's trending on TikTok was something I was like, oh my God, I have to do this. And my daughter, she was like, no, Mom, no, absolutely not. And for those who don't know, like both my podcast and my TikTok, that's something that I always kind of go by her to make sure I don't embarrass her, because she's the one who has to go to school the next day. And yeah, no, she was like, you are absolutely not doing that. And so I did it because I seen those 4 gay men down in Florida, love that account, and they did it. And I'm like, if they can do it, I can do it. And then who shows up on my TikTok feed but Dogface, Uncle from Res Dogs. And he's doing it. And I'm like, that's it. I am absolutely duetting this. So Friday night, I'm dancing with Uncle, and I put it up, and it's not getting many views, and I don't really care. I loved it. It's just fun. Right. And that's what TikTok taught me, was that I am supposed to be having fun with it. And that's why I go on TikTok, is to have fun and to end my day in a good way. So I loved it. Loved Wednesday, loved doing the Wednesday dance on TikTok, loved the TikTok accelerator program. And yeah, and the Sovereignty Act, because I've done at least 2 TikToks on it, man, it's bringing in all the haters who know nothing about Canada, the UK, the treaties, all of it. They know nothing. So anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing the end of the Harry Meghan Netflix special. I think all Canadians should. The other reason is this, like, I always think I'm going to teach my daughter all of the things I know, and that every parent knows this never happens. In fact, the opposite. If it's something that matters to you, it's like they absolutely do not want to know about it. So anyway, I thought I'd be teaching Sam about, you know, the monarchy. I thought she'd go into cadets and learn protocols. She's not interested in any of that, and that's okay. Princess Diana's death, you know, these are things that I spent a lot of time and money and reading on because I knew it was wrong at the time. I knew it was all wrong. So anyway, she won't watch it, which sucks. But I do know there are a lot of kids that are watching it, and for the first time are getting insight into the world of the monarchy. And it is relevant if you're Canadian, because at the end of the day, we're still a Commonwealth, and the Governor General still has to sign off on everything and is the, you know, liaison to the Queen. And that is our protocol in politics. And so if you think you're even slightly political and you don't know any of this, then newsflash, you're not political. because you don't understand the basis of Canada, our constitution, the monarch, nothing. Like, we are a constitutional monarchy. It's really that simple. And for all the Americans who are chiming in, like, I wish you knew how much I just laugh at you for not understanding all of this. And for the Indigenous people who are, obviously for sovereignty, like, yeah, we're all for sovereignty, but shit, you can't mix this up with Canadian law, because that's not sovereignty, right? There's no nice way to put that together. So anyway, those are kind of the things I wanted to talk about. A lot of people have been asking me my opinion on the Netflix special for Harry and Meghan. A lot of people have been asking me about the Sovereignty Act, and I put out one of those like shit post ones where I was like, yeah, so if you, because a lot of people are like, have you even read the Sovereignty Act? And I'm like, have you even read the treaties? Because they've never read the treaties. They don't do land acknowledgements. Oh my God. So anyway, threw that all out there for folks in this podcast, for folks who were asking. And just like for the racist incident that happened to Kurt, I put out a whole podcast for that too. So if you're still interested in that, don't hesitate to watch that podcast with him where he tells his story. And again, tonight is the Reconciliation Action Group meeting at 7. If you are not in Calgary, then please join a local reconciliation group, do action. Otherwise, you are not a treaty partner to me, and you are certainly not a part of reconciliation. Monday is our book club, the last one for 2022, and it is Bruce McIver's Why Reconciliation Fails, Indigenous People, How to Fix It, called Standoff. So I hope you come and join us if you have read it. Now, Bruce is actually supposed to be a part of it. So I guess I should have opened with that. I've been really lucky this year to have some of the authors actually come onto my book club. And I've been lucky to get like Jesse Wente twice now. Yeah. And that's back to the TikTok where it's like, if you don't ask, you won't receive. So my husband really pushed me to ask this year. Good things happened because of it. So for the authors that could make it, I can't thank you enough. Jody Wilson Rainbow, she came on my podcast and my book club. And I've been really blessed with great Indigenous leaders being the great Indigenous leaders they are, and helping this like little Dene in Alberta, trying to I feel alone a lot. And I know a lot of Indigenous people do. Never let that get too deep in you. Read books, read about racial battle fatigue, and work on your healing journey. And if you are local in Calgary, join my book club, join the Reconciliation Action Group. If you're Indigenous, come join my Sacred Fires. We have them every full moon, and we'll go from there. So don't hesitate to reach out if you are a business. Oh yeah, this is another thing. TikTok taught me how much my voice is worth. And I had about 3 different nonprofits, including TD Bank. TD Bank, I had a lot of requests for people to ask me to come do their land acknowledgement. So for 20 minutes, for $100, I'd come do it. No problem. But then 40 emails later, it's like, well, then this is not worth $100, my gas, my time. This is not worth it anymore. Besides, all Indigenous people, myself included, are like, really, you should know how to do a land acknowledgement teaching or a land acknowledgement, right? So I have a whole teaching that you can hire me for that. But then because all these nonprofits and businesses continue to try to screw me over, TD Bank did this. They're like, well, what if we only have you for 10 minutes? Can we only pay you 50? And I was like, that is it. I'm so done. So I have nothing nice to say about TD Bank either. Because they had already done something really horrible during Pride Month to me. So they do not create safe spaces for Indigenous people, let alone QT BIPOC. Anyway, I know they market it, but they don't do it. So bigger picture here, every Canadian should know what a land acknowledgement is, why it's important. If you listen to a single one of my podcasts, I gave you the teaching. I can give you a more intensive one if you want to go to my website. Anyway, you have to pay me now. I'm not doing this 40 emails for $5 honorarium. This is bullshit. And I've told people, you're not going to get elders that way. Elders don't reply to 50 emails, like learn. And I give this information out to people who hire me. Google in elder protocols. You will find that there are the Alberta Human Rights Commission put out something. There's a 10-year-old document from the U of A. Like it's out there. You just got to do your work. Holy. So anyway, you can go to my website too if you want to hire me and talk about it. I went to SAPE for geomatics, so I talk about I take a colonial point of view of geomatics, and then I bring it down and down and down and unpack it so that you understand it from more of a natural law and indigenous point of view. Anyway, land back, land back, land back. And don't, if you're non-indigenous, don't be afraid of that. Just because you did to us the genocide and continue to do the genocide doesn't mean that's what we would do to you. Give us control, you'll see. Anyway, yeah, so standoff. The next one after that in January will be the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, chapters 9 and 10. And I'm really proud that this podcast gives solutions, cultural safety training, cultural first aid, and all of them to create a safer space for Indigenous people of color, those with disabilities, and to us LGBTQ+ to speak. Thank you to authors Cheryl Ward, Chelsea Branch, and Alicia Friedkin of heretohelp.bc.ca for putting together what is Indigenous cultural safety and why should I care about it. Their work and those cultural action tools are available, so please support Indigenous work like that as part of your reconciliation work and settler understandings. I'm just lucky enough to highlight and repeat them here. Internalized racism and lateral violence is another form of violence Indigenous and marginalized people experience by the structure of white supremacy. Go to Donna Bevan's racialequitytools.org for tons of resources, including what is internalized racism, do's and don'ts for bystander intervention by American Friends Service Committee, afsc.org. So if you see or experience racism, you have a better idea of what to do. Indigenous people have been talking about our issues, sharing our traumas in reports, commissions, public hearings, now podcasts, just so it can be regularly disregarded. No more. Honor our words, honor the treaties, listen to politicians and their, oh, I should have said, I met the president of the Alberta Party. They're having their AGM. And yeah, really nice gentleman, former mayor of Brooks, and really cares about diversity, equity, and inclusion. His grandfather was Japanese and was in an internment camp. He's half Japanese, but more white passing, but very aware of his white privilege. And they kicked out some of the really problematic jerk-offs that I have met as part of their candidates. So with a lot of anti-Indigenous bias, right? So I wrote off the Alberta Party for a long time because of it, but now meeting him and seeing how much kinder they are, that made me feel a lot better. I know they're having their AGM, so I'm hoping that they're more conservative types. He was really welcoming. He wanted me to come to the table, not just me, but also our friend who is also Indigenous and a policy maker and shaker. And I'm hoping that they'll be on my podcast here by the end of the week so that you can all hear from her point of view what happened with the NDP. And same with me. I haven't talked about what happened with me in the Alberta Liberal Party. All I can tell you is David Kahn was the reason why I stayed. He was a wonderful man to me. He respected me. Dr. David Swan respected me. Gwyneth Midgley respected me. They cared. They listened to what I had to say. I can't say that anymore about that party. So you're probably not going to see me running for them, the NDP, anything like that. I don't know if I'll ever run actually ever again, because I can see that the colonial framework is not meant for Indigenous people to be at the table. We'll see how my relationship with the Alberta Party continues, but I don't know. I don't have much hope. But for non-Indigenous, you have to understand, regardless, I'm forced to work with the stupid UCP, stupid NDP, stupid Alberta Liberals, whoever it is that is like, okay, let's talk about whatever Indigenous subject. I have to still work with them. Even crappy City of Calgary councillors were like, oh my God, I so care, especially about violence against women. Oh my God. But they literally have never listened to a goddamn word I've ever said. And I'm the freaking co-chair to the committee. They don't care. I don't care what they say. They do not care. That whole farce of anti-racism outreach was so insulting to every Indigenous person who has ever told the city council all of the crapola that we constantly put up with. And it just went in one ear, out the other. Their anti-Indigenous bias is so freaking strong. I just can't even. So anyway, but we're forced to work with all of these parties, no matter what stripe, no matter what order of government, we're forced to work with them, even though they hate us, they have anti-Indigenous bias, they don't listen to us, we're forced to give free education. Anyway, politicians and their policies and platforms, if they don't recognize marginalized in their budget with Gender Equity Plus, if they are cutting services to violence prevention programs, services, Indigenous education, uterus health choices, gay straight alliances, COVID health protocols, lack of human rights for migrants, immigrants, folks with disabilities, not serious about the opioid crisis. Anyway, know that your vote to that party directly negatively impacts marginalized people. Demand that they implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to actions, the recommendations of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the multiple reports about child welfare reform, violence prevention, 231 calls to justice from National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit. Provincially in Alberta, the Kenney government created the 113 Pathways to Justice. So all you blue voters should be holding your blue MLAs to account on it. Follow the new Premier's Council on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls work. Municipally, we have the White Goose Flying Report. Denying these reports is a form of abuse called gaslighting. Our people are experiencing extreme racism in the educational, justice, health, sports clubs, all these institutions, with multiple reports that say the same thing. Demand change from election platforms and politicians. If they don't understand colonialism, racism, privilege, sexism, they literally have zero business running. Should be understood by all parties, local politicians, community organizations, sports clubs. Google's articles on how non-Indigenous Canadians can become allies. If you're experiencing emotional distress after anything I talked about today and want to talk, call the First Nation and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline at 855-242-3310. It's toll free, open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can also text at hopeforwellness.ca. If more related to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and I just can't stress enough how hard the last couple of weeks have been with the news out of Winnipeg. It's been hard for me because I know Joey English's family. They did not bury Joey fully, thanks to the city of Calgary and the Calgary police choosing not to do that proper search. So I'm just throwing this out there to all places across this goddamn country. Change your policies. If you can't go through the garbage and find dead bodies, change your policies. Like, I can't believe I have to say this. And I can't believe non-Indigenous and Canadians are like, oh, it's okay. Let's go to the hockey game and drink our Timmies. You're not doing enough. Can't stress it enough. You're not my reconciliation partner. So anyway, that's a tough conversation. So if you've been triggered by it, 844-413-6649. For non-Indigenous, you can always call your 211 because your infrastructure is always fine working in dollar to dollar compared to non-Indigenous, or you can call 833-456-4566. For a 60 Scoop, you have a whole society here in Alberta, thank God. So 60 Scoop Indigenous Society of Alberta, you can contact at ssisa.ca. The following are 2S LGBTQ2+ crisis supports that are available in most areas across Canada. So you can go to lifevoice.ca. The Trevor Project really put this together for youth. 844-7386. I'll say that one more time. 866-844-7386. And the Trans Lifeline is 877-330-6366. Can't stress enough to you all how much you matter. And the reason why you are the most marginalized is because you are a huge threat to these white, straight, cis men. And it's disgusting. You matter the most because you think outside the box the most. You're the ones with the solutions, and people in power don't like that. So I hope you know how much you're loved and valued to folks like me. Addiction and recovery is a major issue for me. I'm a facilitator for Mending Broken Hearts. Wellbriety through the White Bison Institute is a great organization to help with an Indigenous lens, and the Medicine Wheel to help with addictions, because AA is really based off of Christianity and, in my opinion, shaming. It's super shitty. I don't like it at all, but we have to do what we do because all of our white straight male politicians in power just absolutely love control and Christianity. So this is why we're forced to use this, and that's where all the funding goes. Anyway, I feel government policy has absolutely caused a crisis of drug poisoning, their failure to give us proper drug supply. So as a result, there's 2 apps that you can download. And there's a number you can use. So if you're using substances, please don't use alone. If you are using alone, you can call the National Overdose Response Service at 888-688-NORS, or you can download the Braves and the Doors apps. And this is it's like making a safety plan. If you are a woman or a person who's experiencing violence and you call a lot of the crisis supports, they will help you with a safety plan. It's the same idea here for folks who are using alone. We don't want you to die. I don't want you to die. And these are some coping tools that you can have in order to, stay alive. I want you to stay alive. Violence is my everyday reality. Every Indigenous generation has faced it. This is self-care, how I take my power back. It's why I started this podcast, to speak freely without interruption, tone police, leadership shaming, sexism, gaslighting questions. As many people don't want to hear an Indigenous woman's opinion, but sure likes to tell us theirs by people who know nothing about us, colonialism, constant surveillance of our people, our protests, our vigils, and our rights. I and many others share info on microaggressions daily, outright racism, and it's unacceptable to say it anymore. So learn about being trauma informed. Folks like me are dealing with internalized racism and gatekeeping, and folks who survive off the status quo or are so in their trauma that they stop people from being able to do the work and deplete personal resources. Trauma bonding is also something else that's on my radar, and I hope that folks understand, like I understand I have a responsibility and I don't want to misuse that responsibility. So I am not a perfect person and I may say things that hurt you and I don't want to. Internal and external racism is an everyday reality for me, Indigenous people, folks with disabilities, QT, BIPOC, and many others. Masi Cho, to my ancestors, to my granny, my mama, what strength looks like through your example. I want to thank my aunties, my uncles for always being there for me, my cousins. Thank you to my dad for teaching me to be strong and blunt. Thank you to my stepmom for showing me what a proud culture is through her Austrian family and roots and teaching me to be a proud Calgarian. It is through her I am a second generation. Thank you to my husband, Big Buffalo Rockman, for producing and editing the show. On top of being my husband, my childhood friend, father of our child, he has supported me down my journey of the Red Road and has witnessed decades of racism and sexism. And to our child, Thunderpipe Necklace Woman, we are blessed to learn from you daily, and we are honored you chose us. You give me daily accountability to be a better and stronger person. My hope is that my daughter, my family will be proud in the future of us discussing these issues today, and that they'll understand it in the future. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. If you value listening or watching and can afford to give, thank you. To those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or questions. I also have a YouTube channel. You can go and subscribe, and you can go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media, and if you want to hire me. And I want to end by giving side eye to those Calgary rabbits. You're lucky I'm not Tradish. My beautiful cousins responded one day, "Are you being my dish?" So thank you, folks, for listening.